Hi, this is an episode of Ask Dr. Anna, and we have Michele Rosenthal with us today, and I'm thrilled and excited because Michele has an incredible story and information to share with us, and she's just launched a new book as well. Hi, Michele, how are you?
Hi, Dr. Anna. I am fantastic and so excited to talk to you today.
Oh, I'm thrilled to have you here too. And you know what? I was reading something about your book, and you have a very unique perspective, but even more than that, you understand it from the inside out. You've experienced trauma. I want to know, what shaped you to be this awesome person that you are today?
Oh my gosh. Well, it started in 1981, so I'm going to give you the quick version of what was a long process, and I think that's really important to mention as we get into our discussion, because it's very easy to think, oh, look what Michele did, and she managed, and it did not happen overnight. And so it started in 1981. I was just a 13-year-old kid with a routine infection. The doctor gave me a routine antibiotic, and I had anything but a routine response to it. Unbeknownst to everyone, I was allergic to the antibiotic, and the allergic reaction turned me into a full-body burn victim, essentially. I lost the first 2 layers of my skin from head to toe in a quarantine burn unit in New York City. And when I came out of the hospital, I knew, I mean, you can look at me, I don't look like a burn victim. I had amazing care. But I knew I was going to make a full physical recovery, but emotionally, I could not come out of what had happened. I'd had a near-death experience, and that moment just haunted me. And think about it, Dr. Anna, at 13, what kind of coping skills do we have for major trauma?
Right, you don't have life experiences to make sense of any of that, and
Right.
you're also just blossoming into your life, and that got cut short. So how did you reckon with that? Like, how did you grapple with that? Because that is a big T trauma.
It is, and I did not grapple with it well.
Okay.
I mean,
What was happening to you? How did you know you weren't grappling with it well?
I went from a very free-flowing, happy-go-lucky kid to an adolescent who was always angry, very difficult to reach. I would go into these deep, dark depressions for days, and it was very easy. In the early 1980s, you know, the DSM-4 or 3 was, in 1980, that was the first time PTSD was actually recognized as a clinical diagnosis, and it was only being applied to combat veterans coming out of Vietnam, not civilian kids with medical trauma.
So nobody could really figure out what was going on with you, and it was one of those, am I crazy stories?
Well, and that's just it. I ended up with horrible insomnia, nightmares that kept recurring, anxiety that I just ran through every day trying to race the clock, beat the clock. If I could just live through the next minute, maybe I could catch my breath. And, you know, by the time I was 18, it didn't even take that long, but I think of 18 as the first time that I realized there's something really wrong with me, because I went to college and just fell apart. At home, it was easy. My mom would constantly be saying, you need to talk to a therapist. You need to see a specialist. And so there was sort of a structure at home. But once left on my own, I descended into a dark despair, an eating disorder that would go on for the next 20 years. And things became really bad. And I did actually accept the fact I thought I was crazy. Some people in this world are crazy. And I've been a writer since I was 7. So I thought, you know, lots of writers are crazy. Let me embrace the crazy.
But Michele, you just said something very important. Somehow you were not stabilizing and recovering, but you must have turned a corner. What happened? How did you turn that corner and make sense of all of this and come to the place that you're at today? Like, this is an evolution story.
It's true. And, you know, my first book that I wrote is called Before the World Intruded. It's the full evolution, and it was part of my healing process to chart out how did things go so wrong and how do I make it right. And that was very interesting. And one of the things that I really discovered in writing that book was that there was always this little voice. As often as I said, let's just embrace the crazy, there was a little voice saying, I don't like the crazy. You know?
Sure.
I think maybe we could live another way.
Yeah. Why do you want to live in that pain, embodied, constantly distressed state. I mean, that is not a natural and normal state. And when I see trauma survivors and they are in that state, there has to be a sea change to move out of that place and into a place of restoration where we embrace our growth and we start to move on this new platform today.
You know, I think that moment comes when we finally think, feel, intuit, whatever it is, because it comes in different ways and forms. I think that sea change happens when we decide, I want to live. Beautiful. It's not, I just want to survive or I just want to cope. I want to live.
Nice.
And when I finally got to that moment, you're right, it was a sea change. Everything altered, and I really engaged in recovery. I became an advocate for myself. I started researching. I started doing whatever I could to heal. So I would say that's the biggest turning point, and that has a lot to do with, I think, you know, what my new book is about, which is, it's called Your Life After Trauma. It's about how do we reclaim who we are after trauma? How do we re-engage with that inner self connection?
Tell me something about this, because this new book, and say the title again.
It's Your Life After Trauma, Powerful Practices to Reclaim Your Identity.
Now, you have one strong message that weaves through the book, that cuts through and helps people really get this big change. What is it? What do they need to hear? What do our listeners need to hear about that big piece that you have to offer them?
Is that you can look outside for support and guidance, and that is all incredibly necessary. But real healing can only happen in yourself and in the reconnection that happens in yourself. As trauma survivors, we become so fragmented. We spend a lot of time dissociating, and even in our identity, our sense of self, how we see ourselves, how we define ourselves, there's a big disconnect. Whether that's the before-after gap that I always talk about, like who were you before and who do you become after. But many of us were traumatized as kids. Your identity doesn't even start to form until between the ages of 13 and 18. So to me, if you're traumatized anytime before 18 to 22, you really have no before. So you're starting over from scratch, making choices and taking actions to deliberately create who you are. And that's the message of this book. In
Wow.
Your Life After Trauma, we're really talking about how do you create who you are, whether you were traumatized at the age of 5 or 50.
That is beautiful. Listen, what I want to do is just recap for a minute. First, tell us again the name of your book.
Your Life After Trauma.
Okay, now the other thing that you said is if you really want to make this pivotal shift, you got to dive deep and find that resource inside of yourself, and that you got to embrace today, because this is where you create your new story and an incredible foundation about what it's like to live your life. Michele, you are amazing. Thank you so much for spending the time to talk with me about your book and help us talk about post-traumatic growth and recovery. Amazing. Thank you. And I just want to recognize the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Anna, thank you for being the kind of professional I wish I'd had guiding me during my recovery. Because the people helping me did not understand everything exactly the way you do. And so I greatly respect and admire that you're working in this space. I feel so lucky to have you.